because it was before the summons. It was, and then he came back, and then he had the state of Israel that he announced that he had never stated that before with Bibi, and now he had the meeting with Bibi and never announced Israel. So he has absolutely taken him down another path, and this is how crazy it gets. I'm going to take it from the other side, the Britain side. The prime minister just can't get with the program. Mm-mm. And so when he went after the Greenlanders should be able to take care of and govern the Greenlanders, and he isn't true. And the Britons should be able to, govern Britons. And so that didn't go well. And then we come into this whole process, and they're going, no, we're not going to send anything. We're not going to be involved in this. And then when we're already there and handling everything, then all of a sudden, okay, we'll send 2 ships. And he goes, so you can keep them home. I'm not even trying to give the powerful words. The president can say it much better, but in essence, we don't need you. And then they tried to block the Strait of Hormuz. It's like, excuse me. And Lloyd's of London has been famous for so long, and they thought they had the power play because they've always been in charge. Imagine, they've been in charge, control over us. They've been in charge, control over Canada and Australia and New Zealand and wanted Greenland. They sent their troops over. We even laughed about it. Remember the day that it was happening? We were on an interview together, and they sent the troops, and then they got a phone call, and they had an hour to depart because you either depart or we're going to do 100% tariffs. So this whole thing has built up to where we are now to prove to the world that the control that we have been under has been broken. And not only are we going to be good neighbors to the Western Hemisphere, which we've never done, and that's why we went through the whole thing about Davos and coming up with the peace board, and everything was already done ahead of time, and the president shook hands, and then he had this all set up. The brilliance of this, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. And then since we talked, when he was just in Kentucky yesterday, he had the green lights come on. Did you guys see that?
Oh, yeah.
So that's a real message, and it matches the cue board, the 38 seconds that was on, 37, 38 seconds. And then and what was said after that and how he matched the terminology. And so I just had people ask me on a 2.5 hour today, they kept saying, so where do you think we're at? Do you think we're really following the cue board? I said, if you aren't realizing how it is so precise and everything we're doing is so precise. And so to me, he's already broken the backs of them to state the state of Israel, to say, I never mentioned Israel, and then Israel is so involved now. And I'm so excited about where we are. I really am.
Yeah, fantastic. Juan, what are your thoughts on the war and the short term? I believe a lot of people are saying it's going to be like Iraq. Not at all. It's going to be, yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Oh, I apologize. Like somebody's trying to call in here, and of course, let me just cut that out. Could you text Alan? Just tell him.
I'll throw in a statement.
Yeah.
Here we are over there. We do not have anybody boots on ground. You want to call this a war? The precision of this is so spectacular. Yeah. And Juan and I were in Chicago on August 18 of 23, and that was the last day of the 10 days when the military of all the nations got together. First time ever in all of history. For 10 days, he had exercises. And I think we've had interviews on this already, but people may forget because that was back in 23. And so now here I'm hearing from guys in the Netherlands. I didn't know who was buying the books in the Netherlands, and they're following all of our interviews, and they're the ones that sent me the picture about the War Party unit. And everything is in the air. And people didn't understand when everything was happening with the nukes back in June, and he was taking care of that. Do you realize those guys, and I think we've mentioned this, the guys stayed in those B-2s for 36 hours. Guys, to do this for us. They never touched ground. They left America and they came back to America with never touching ground. So not only are their boots not on the ground, their flights are not landing on the ground. This is being handled because we have to take care of business. To me, that's what it is. It's not, this doesn't resemble war. But today in that process, everybody said, no, it's the Middle East. He's got us back in there. Now we're back in the Middle East. Now we've started a hornet's nest. And these are people I've trusted for a long time. And I said, we are not going down that path. No. Stop it. Just stop that conversation.
Very good. Juan.
Well, and by the way, the thing here, Michael, is that there's a lot of people that would like us to be fighting the last war. Um, so they could pull the strings even down into our own military. Remember, when the president had all of the general staff and flag officers out there in Virginia last fall, they got the Riot Act. There's a way that we're going to do this. Everybody's on board. No dissension in the ranks. We're doing something completely different. And one of the things, you mentioning Israel, remember the area where modern day Israel is located around Jerusalem there, that was the Palestinian district. And coming into World War I and out of World War I, that Palestinian district was controlled by Britain. It was the Balfour Declaration between Lord Balfour and Lord Rothschild that allowed that Zionists, a Jewish clan of within the banking and money community, could buy land, and when they had enough land there in the Israeli territory, the Palestinian territory, they could then declare themselves a reborn nation of Israel and begin to govern again. And in the small print, it's not for public understanding, but it's in the small print, it's there. It says that the British royal crown, not just any royal families, but the British royal crown, the Windsors, retains the right at will to place a sovereign on the throne in this reestablished nation of Israel. If there's some circumstance, some instance where there would be a crisis and you'd need to, take control, the Brits have retained the right to put somebody on the throne in Jerusalem and take control. And so they haven't given up that area, even though Israel has declared itself a nation state again. They're still, up to their eyeballs, everything that goes on inside of Israel at this time. And it's like the Commonwealth countries. You think, they're their own country now, and the British Empire is all broken up. Largest nation in the world, largest country in the world is still the British Commonwealth. They act like a union of states at some level, with the crown operating at the top. And so we're still fighting the Revolutionary War. Look at where Zelensky goes when Trump had a deal that was already agreed upon. Zelensky shows up at the White House and he's going to sign a ceasefire. And then they're going to work through the details to come up with an actual peace agreement. Zelensky gets there, and because he talked with his Davos buddies and people in the Pentagon, supposedly on the U.S.'s side, but anti-Trump, he decides that he's not going to sign a ceasefire until a peace agreement's in place. Well, it's an impossibility. Trump just wants to stop the killing, and then you can focus on working out a deal that works, and we'll help broker it. They didn't want to do it. Where does Zelensky go? Within 12 hours of walking out the doors at the White House, dialing him in again. That's mad. If you could send him a note. So I apologize. I get calls on my phone all the time here, and I can't block them out. So. Stringer. No, this is. Sorry, I had an incoming call. I apologize. There we go. Sorry, I had an incoming call. It screws us up there. But the Brits are, we're in a Revolutionary War, second Revolutionary War. We're really in.
Zelensky left the White House and he went to
Britain.
He went to Britain.
Yep. And so he supposedly made a deal with Trump, and he didn't get what he wanted, so he went to Britain, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll give you what you want," and so the war continues.
Yeah, and how many lives have been lost in the years since that happened? It's a horror for all sides out into the world, and the threats of escalation that have occurred since that meeting. Including Russia reminding everybody that they're ready to go nuclear if they have to. So this is the Brits are who are fighting in large measure across the world. And by the way, China, if you get right down to it, being run by the banks there in the city of London, city within the city, still tied to this whole British operation. Remember who was running Hong Kong all those years. They have not been fully distinct from China itself. And so a lot of the threats that we're facing all over the world, it's Britain and China working in tandem secretly against U.S. interests and to stop and block America from, like Gulliver rising up and taking control of the situation.
Yeah, definitely. So, we have this war going on with Britain, really, like you said, and that's great, great call. A second Revolutionary War. So where do you think this is going to end? I think Trump is, being very strategical, and he's basically finessing this so there's not a larger war against England, but we're seeing in the, Straits of Hormuz. And with the like Sheila was talking about, they're trying to do the bonds and control the stuff, and we talk about the bonds here in a minute. But Lloyd's of London is getting exposed. All of these different groups, they've been controlling the banks and so forth for a long time. Is the takedown of the money system the thing that makes this collapse British Empire? What is going to collapse them?
Well, let me dive in here, and then I'll hand it back over to Sheila. Let me make a little bit of a progression. Mm-hmm. Trump has two primary things that he wants accomplished during his presidency, and to be remembered for accomplishing, not just for America but for the world: honest elections, yeah, and honest money. And they actually kind of go in that sequence. Everything that's about to happen here in America within the election stuff and the people that were stealing elections for America, that's a threat to this globalista that's been really running the world. Remember, the people that we have now testifying before grand juries that we brought into the country, where we're keeping safe outside the country for the last almost 5 years, those people have testified, and they have given their statements that they manipulated elections in 71 countries plus the United States. So literally over half the free world has leadership in place that's not the will of the people in that country. It's artificial. They're being puppeteered, controlled, and including heavily every one of the Commonwealth countries with this vote manipulation, vote fraud. And it's foreign interference to interfere in another nation's election. That's a weapon of mass destruction. It's classified by international law and agreements as being the same as a nuclear or biological strike, because it has the potential to cause mass casualties, death, and destruction. So it is a weapon of mass destruction when one country wields electoral fraud on another country. In this case, a number of countries were involved: Venezuela, Cuba, Serbia, China. The ballots, the paper ballots, in large measure were printed right there in China and then shipped into the U.S. through Singapore on the West Coast through Vancouver, BC, and then Seattle, and on the East Coast a Florida location, and Baltimore Harbor. And so, with that in mind, that was foreign interference on the paper, and then the electronic interference with several people or groups involved into the U.S. Through the server farm in Serbia, and prior to that, other locations. So, with that in mind, we were attacked. It amounts to a military attack at a nation state level, war by another means, and to control our country, which at some level succeeded. And now, when we fight back, the fight back is it doesn't help if you have secret trials, secret tribunals, because that's not curative. You need to go through this in the public eye. The whole world has to see, and we start at the top. America, in large measure, running the world. The most powerful country in the world, most powerful military in the world, politically the most powerful. So we start here, get the cleanup started here, and then we can go to other places in the world and help other countries to do the same, because the same players were involved in all these different places. On the way to getting there, the banking, the paper money, we talk about the U.S. Federal Reserve System and operations, but they're tied to an international reserve currency system based out of the city of London, and the city within the city, the old Roman Empire city. When you go there, you see the old Roman wall around that area, and Basel, Switzerland, and other things. But the core, all that 100 banks are right there in the city of Rome, inside London. And as we go after that, a large portion of what's going on here, probably the most significant, is that there's been bond fraud. And the bonds are the way that you finance a lot of things in the United States, and everybody needs to kind of brace themselves. I was going slow on this. I've been on this for years, but even over the last year and a half or so, while we got our ducks in a row, it's a bit complex, but it boils down to this. In the U.S., 85% of the bond fraud that's going on in the U.S. Involving bonds, it's all tied to schools, school districts. And that bond fraud is so extensive that at a bare ass minimum, you'll lose 600 banks. One of the things that happened after 2008, and I'm going to come back around to a spiritual side of this and hand it back over to Sheila in a moment, but I want people to think about this. Bare ass minimum, you're going to lose 600 banks in the bond fraud here in the U.S. And it won't wait until the worst of it arrives in 2030, 2031, 2032. The first cracks have already shown up in the windscreen. Just as a funny thing, I was thinking of the Brits. They had an aircraft that they were testing, and in order to make sure that it was able to survive a bird strike. This is a true story. So they were asking about the weight of the chicken, or the type of chicken that we're using in the U.S. test to make sure that they could survive a bird strike. And so they have a certain Cornish hen size, chicken bird. You can get them. You don't have to, have a fresh live one or something like that. You can just find them in the frozen section, and this weight and hit the windscreen. So a few months go by, and they're testing this system, and they'd spent millions and millions of dollars, and they could not get their windscreens to be able to withstand bird strike. And so they asked for an American, one of the people from one of the groups that had been doing this testing, come over and look over their shoulder at great expense. He goes over and watches them do a test. And pretty instantaneously, well, okay, I know what the problem is. And the reason that you're failing these tests, you don't use a frozen chicken hitting the windscreen at 300 miles an hour. You can thaw it out first.
Oh boy.
And, well, but it's at an altitude where it could be frozen. Well, if it was at that altitude, it probably wouldn't be alive. It wouldn't be flying anyway. So the bird strikes are down at lower levels. Anyway, they got it all right, but they got it completely logically wrong. But anyway, the Brit system with the banking is when we had 2008 happen here in the U.S., and remember the President Bush came out, and this was in the fall, coming up on the election, and all of a sudden we have a national emergency that they had to step into the banking realm, and they're printing money like madmen, and the Federal Reserve is in there and saving the world. And Bush said at the podium there, he said, we had to act because if we had not acted and acted decisively in what we did with printing money and spreading it out in secret little things to all their friends and buddies, that within 24 hours, the world banking and by extension economic world would cease to function or exist. And once it collapsed, it would not be able to be repaired quickly. So we'd literally gone to the Stone Age. And you can just kind of think about it. When you have a cascading event like this, one thing breaks, now you can't go to the gas station, use your credit card to buy gas. And you can't even pay for it with cash because the machines are all tied into banking systems and electronic systems, and they can't process even the cash transaction. The company can't pay you on your check for what you earned, and if you can't get paid by the company because the bank isn't working right, you can't buy the gas in the first place. But then again, you can't pay the lease or the mortgage or other stuff. And when it comes unglued like that, to get everything working back together again, a payment system, a receive system, in the processing of all these debt obligations and payments and even into the government, to start it back up again, so once it's stopped, frozen, locked up, is just not going to happen. It's a cascading event. It's a total meltdown. So they stepped in and took care of it. One of the fixes that occurred within the 2008 repair process was they started doing stress tests on the banks. And they required that the banks now have to hold 60% of their cash in bonds, government issued bonds, where they're securitized. The government's going to make sure they get paid. Well, what's the biggest bond market that the U.S. has? It's related to schools, public schools. And so they're required to hold these. The problem is they've been rolling these bonds over where they don't have to pay principal or interest in many cases, and they're just a balloon payment at the end. And many of these have been going on now for a couple of decades. And the problem is that the number that's owed now just in interest is so great that there's not enough money in many of the counties across the country. If you took all the money from all the people in the county, they couldn't service the interest on these bonds that are owed. So you have reached a point literally of no return. It's only a matter of time now before this whole thing blows apart in an unbelievable way. Now, if in the way that most of the people have thought about this, early on, and it was really not adequate to the situation, the Federal Reserve would just print money and loan it out to the banks to continue to service the debt on these bonds. but it's Weimar Republic stuff. It would take so much money just to maintain interest payments in many of the major counties across the country that you break the value of the dollar so decisively down that literally wheelbarrows of dollars won't fix the problem. And in the financial markets, markets anticipate. Think of the stock market. If you're paying a good stock is considered a stock maybe where you have 16 times earnings. So earnings is annual earnings. If they make $1 billion of profit in a year, and then that's called earnings on all of their stuff beyond taxes, expenses, everything else. If you look at the price of the stock, if the stock is within close to 16 times earnings, that's considered a pretty reasonable investment. That's a pretty good return on your investment. You put a capital investment in, it might be in this case $16 billion. And if you hold that stock for 16 years, you get the principal that you invested, and that 16 years of earnings is worth 16 billion more. It's doubled in value if you rolled your earnings over into the stock again. Companies like an Amazon or a Google or something like that, they've gone up to 2 and 3 and even 1,000 times earnings. But the expectation is they're at the cutting edge of some kind of an industry that is growing so fast that you're investing in it and buying the future because you believe that the growth of the company is such that in 10 or 15 or 20 years, they're so many times bigger than they are that the $1 billion earnings is irrelevant because they're going to be making, $1 trillion a year in profits or something somewhere down the road, 100 million, 100 billion or whatever, and so you're investing in its ability to, continue to grow massively. And so you do those in a speculative way. In the case of bonds were considered little old ladies, children, somebody that, they're not sophisticated. They can't look at this day to day, and they got to have the money. Retirement 401ks and like that. And so you'd have this, bond investments, small return, low risk. Because it's low risk, the banks were required after 2008 as part of the protection to carry 60% of their cash deposits in bonds. The problem is the bonds aren't worth the paper they're printed on. In fact, if you liquidated everything out just as it sits right now, real value, cashable value of the bonds is somewhere down around 13 to 15%. And that's the cash value. There's not enough, unlike, say, a water district where they're selling the water as a utility, electrical district where they're generating, payments from customers like that. The schools, what generates the payments to service those bonds is taxes on the property. And at the core of the problem, you have districts all over the country where they have artificially continued to hike the values of the houses, the reported values, therefore the taxable value artificially. And it doesn't fit the guidelines. It's a little wonky here, but think about what I'm saying for a second. If you have certain employers in a neighborhood, let's say it's Amazon and the golf shop and a car dealer and some restaurants and some law firms, you take the median income of the people that live in that area and you look at what they can support as far as taxes for property taxes. Even if you're a renter, the guy that owns the building that you're renting from, his rents are based on what people can afford to pay. Right. And then the value of the building's based on that. So What they've been doing is this game where they keep upping the property values for assessment purposes. And everybody's kind of been going along with, but now the assessments are going up and up and up, and they're not tied to real revenue in the areas. And so your property taxes are becoming unwieldy, more than you can afford to pay. For example, in Colorado, property taxes in the last year went up on an average of 40%.
Wow.
Now think about that. How many years can you do that? And they're saying they have to up it again next year and the year after. So what's happening? And it's tied precisely, directly, specifically to public schools.
Yep.
So with that in mind, there is a limit. You know, people still have to eat. They still have other taxes they have to pay. They still have to be able to function. If you're retired living off a fixed income, which is tied to the bonds in your 401k or whatever, you might be toast. And if you have money in the bank and the bank goes bankrupt, even your deposits in the bank, while the FDI insures stuff, if all the banks fail at those kind of numbers simultaneously, they have to print all this money to cover it. What happens to the value of everybody else's dollars when you print a lot of new dollars? It dilutes the value of the other dollars. So now you have a value crisis. When I say that metals are critical for everybody here at this moment in time, it's because you're really looking at some variation of the Weimar Republic in Germany. At the end of World War I, the US dollar traded exactly the same value as the Deutschmark. By 1933, 16 years later, they had changed the Deutschmark, which had a dollar valuation, from first hundreds to thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions to billion-dollar Deutschmarks. And a wheelbarrow of billion-dollar notes wouldn't buy a loaf of bread, let alone the wheelbarrow it was in. So that's hyperinflation, obviously. Brazil went through this. On these bonds, as they get unwieldy and out of control, initially they'll try to print their way out of it. It's impossible. That's why Trump is warning these cities like Mandami in New York and others that he's not going to help those cities when the crisis hits. They're going to be on their own if they're going to go their direction. Okay, have at it. California, have at it. Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. By the way, probably the worst in the whole country, and nobody sees this coming. Nobody's talking about is Chicago. Oh my God, what's about to happen there? So with all of this in mind, and the schools being at the core of this, what's going to happen with kids, education, sports? I was talking to Ohio Brett about this just the other day. You have an existential crisis. It's an L event. It's an extinction level event within the monetary community that we're right on the brink of. It won't wait till 2031 or 32. Just 2 days ago, 33 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds were purchased by the Treasury because on the open market, there was no buyers for those bonds at the numbers that we wanted to keep the interest rate at, so we bought them back ourselves. That can't happen very many times. There's a crisis looming that is beyond most people's even vision to, visualize what this could look like within the way that our government, our society functions. And at the core is the school bonds. And then think about the control. Now let's go to kind of the spiritual side. Think about the control over the way we think, our children think, everything that's going on in our world today, and the teachers' unions, the teachers, the things that they want to do, the indoctrination, not education. As this starts to accelerate and take root, and people realized where the fraud was at, including the administrations with these school superintendents who aren't even U.S. citizens. You saw what happened. We got the guy out in Ohio, wasn't even a U.S. citizen. He's the school superintendent at the largest district in the state. And then the same thing happens at LAUSD, largest school district in the country. And turns out the guy that's running the school district isn't even a U.S. citizen. And what does he administer? He administers the bonds that are tied to property taxes for the school district. And there's a lot more there, by the way. Questions about his ties to Spanish intelligence operations. We'll see how that builds out. And why is that important? Because who runs Mexico? The Spaniards. That's who it is, and a couple of Lebanese. So at the end of the day, if the guy that's there at LA Unified School District in California wants to, coordinate and make things right for his buddies in Mexico who are bringing all the students in and getting them into the system and getting all sorts of assistance and help, and it's helping these Spanish families that are running Mexico by remote control. We got to rethink what's going on here. So I'll get this fine. So there's a lot of angles here that haven't been considered by the public. But even from now we go to a spiritual side. If our country's been hijacked in the vote and in the financial, how can you have real freedom? And the people that are put in, a lot of the attack, look at what's going on in Virginia. In Virginia, they're looking to pass a law that will require that teachers teach about the January 6th stuff from 2021 as though it was an insurrection, and that Trump was lying about the vote fraud, and that will be mandatory in the curriculum. Jesus. By the legislature. And then you think of the spiritual things, God's out of the schools, blah, blah, blah. It's run by the state. When the country was founded and during the Constitution, there was no provision for publicly paid for education. It was all private, and then people could vote with their feet which one they wanted to go with. I like the idea of public education, but so that we have some kind of a base and a floor. But the whole operation with the national teachers unions and things like that has been completely hijacked. And now you see the end of it, and it's for the children, for the children, for the children. For the children, America has been bankrupted, and you're about to have a existential life and death experience for America in a way that it defies almost explanation. I don't know if that's a good segue for Sheila or not, but I think so. Sheila, you understand the history of the country and where we're at. This is a big deal.
Yeah, it's like a second revolution, like we've been talking about, and both of you guys have talked about Albert Pike. This is all pre-planned. This great third world. Juan, you would say the fourth, World War.
Yeah, Fourth World War. Yeah.
Right. So it's all pre-planned. Albert Pike was talking about it before World War I, and he outlined World War II and the Third World, which is basically against the Zionists and the Muslims. So
this whole thing in the Middle East was engineered. Remember, he had 300,000 missiles in Lebanon that Iran built and moved in there. He had another 100,000 in Gaza that Iran built and were sifted in there. And by the way, I've mentioned before, but just to remind people, Beirut is this explosion that happened there. It's after the decimation of this huge explosion in Beirut several years ago. The buildings are still full of shrapnel holes. The place is completely decimated. Nothing's been rebuilt. Nothing's been repaired. Hezbollah's as busy in there as ever. And what was the cause of that explosion? They had a rocket fuel manufacturing facility that was using this fertilizer that had been put in a building, seized at sea. It was all a ruse. It was one of the biggest ruses in the history of the world. They put this fertilizer there and then had it sitting there for almost a decade while they were arguing over ownership and whether or not it was lawfully going to Africa or whatever it was going to. And in reality, it was parked there so they had the basis for making rocket fuel. Because when they ship them from Iran, they didn't have any fuel. They're rocket bodies. And then they would get to Lebanon and to Gaza, and they had to have rocket fuel for those rockets. And so it was being manufactured there at the port in an underground facility. When that exploded and all that fertilizer exploded, it was because it was intentional. The Israelis did a particular thing and blew that underground factory up. Had German processing systems in there. So, and by the way, I got to show you something real quick here. So, somebody has a sense of humor. They have a little car. They've got the General Lee. It's got a British flag.
That's hilarious.
I think it's, my kind of guys to have some fun with it. So anyway.
All right, Sheila, what are your thoughts?
Well, going back to England, or going back to the education process with Alice Bailey and Madame Blavatsky, who set it up. And you mentioned Albert Pike. He had a Lucifer bracelet that Lucifer spoke to him through the bracelet. Alice Bailey said the same thing. He was only able to do KKK for 12 years because he died. And so he was gone in the 1800s after he did all this to us. And then she comes along. And in 1901, she comes out of England. I mean, these people all came out of England, guys, and did this. And this is what the Pilgrims got away from. And so Alice Bailey said that Lucifer gave her this 100-year plan with the education system to be printing all of the textbooks and take the children and the generations, the children, in the direction they wanted them to go. And so, but President Trump's been on top of all of this. He's the first one to say we got to get rid of this Department of Education. That's what Linda McMahon's been very clear. I'm here to eliminate my job. So the Department of Education has to go. This was compulsory in 1850. Big part of why 1854 they started a party for the Republic to get the focus back on the Republic. And so that was in Ripon, Wisconsin. And the pictures of the opening of that, I have one. And they actually had an elephant there. It was just hilarious. But anyway, so that's what they did in 1854 after compulsory school education in public schools in 1850. And I kept telling people in the first term, God is helping the president. He's giving you school choice. And people kept saying, well, tell me what button to push to get the forms that I fill out. Just like he's doing all the executive orders now, he's opening doors everywhere, guys, to help us get out of this situation. And we're still stuck in this situation because school choice hasn't been passed by the majority of states yet. So we're eliminating the Department of Education now, and we're not ready for that. But again, everything that we've been doing is because we've never been free of England. We've never been free of England. 1812, we were still fighting for the land. And when they were still going to get pushed off out of their homes and off their land, the Native Americans, the Creek tribe was the largest in America. They fought for another 4 years. They fought until 1816, could not do it. And so then they still got pushed off of their land. And so that's what I was going to talk about with your guy, Daniel. He got a permit after he bought land and built a house and passed all the inspections, and now they want to pull the permit and condemn the property and ruin his house and get him off the land because we aren't standing up and being the people who are in charge of these things. We're not in charge of any money areas, and I've been talking about this since the first term. If you don't start finding out who's on the school board and put good, powerful people on the school board, in the communities, you have to get the people. We have to completely deconstruct what Charles Joseph Bonaparte put in. And that's a corporation over each of these that we don't even know exist. We have people controlling every village, town, city, county, state. And we just think that we've got all this power and we can go be the mayor of this. Well, you can't do anything that they don't want you to do because they're in charge, because they have a merit-based selection system. And if you want to do what you want to do, just like Daniel wanted to do what he wanted to do with his land, it's still their land because they're still in control over you, and they'll just pull it and threaten you and burn your outer buildings. They'll keep on it until you can't stand, because we're not standing together. But back to England, because that's where you were with what was happening with where we are now. England, we are forgetting back during COVID, it was when Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth, and I'll never forget the look on her face. There was a short little video, and they're being driven out of Buckingham Palace. Nobody's been in there since. Nobody's going to be in there. It's been boarded up, painted up. There's nobody going to be in there, just like the FBI building. We've talked about all this, but just as a summary, with England, when that happened, people didn't put it together. It's the same thing that as other things they do. They did it. It was three. The president and wife of Harvard, same day, all got COVID the same day. King and Queen of Sweden got it same day. So here's Prince Philip and Elizabeth out of Buckingham Palace. President Trump, when he went in September, he wasn't hosted at Buckingham Palace. That's not there. He was still the one inspecting the guard. And now Charles is not aware of how to make the 6 foot. That was the funniest part of him trying to follow. He couldn't figure out how to come around the end of the guard and stay 6 feet out, because that's their plan. And so he was trying to do that. But President Trump made it very, very clear that things had changed. He rode in the king's carriage. That doesn't happen. And so there are things that I think have taken place. I think there are things that are cleaned up in London that will be revealed at the appropriate time. I think that State of Israel corporation documents and our corporation documents, I think there are things that are going to be revealed at the right time. And that's why it really doesn't matter whether Britain cooperates now or not, because they're finding out they're not in charge anywhere. And don't you find it interesting that all of these answers are coming back from the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister always, even when it was the guys that were totally controlled, all had to go to the Crown and get the approval of the Crown to even make a decision or negotiate. And did you notice nobody's going to the Crown of England? And did you notice the terminology that came out about the Western Kingdom? King George, that George is named after, what happened in America, that King George was over both kingdoms. Eastern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere. People don't remember this. And then in all of his titles of being the King of England, the King of Ireland, the King of France, and it just goes on and on and on, he was also His Excellency, the President of the United States. When Trump got back from that English trip, the name His Excellency started coming up for him, and His Excellency, the President of the United States. People had no idea that the crown has been His Excellency, Her Excellency, President of the United States. It never changed. Those titlings are in their documentation and in their bios. They're not hiding it from us, but we never understood the control that was over us. So to come out from under these things that we're facing now, there is so much that Trump has already disrupted that I don't think they can't regain the respect from these countries. I mean, I'm hearing from people in Canada, and some of these were in the comments from our last interview. You guys are hitting on it, because did you know that we've got Chinese forces here with AK-47s at our borders of the provinces in Canada? And that was planned for us. It was in California where Newsom's executive secretary couldn't take it. She gave the storage unit keys to the authorities and the guns and everything for them to come in from Mexico and Canada in the 2017, not just 2020 elections. They were all set. Well, we couldn't do it now, but we'll do it next time. And they were all set. Everything was set. Everything was already there, already arrived, already transported. Sacramento is not near a port. It's not near a border. Sacramento is a heck of a way for them to transport these things, and nobody knew. And those storage units were full. Everything was ready to go. Bring your guys in. I got everything for them. So we have not been awake to the fact of everything that President Trump is correcting. And for him to have done what he did in June without any planes landing, any boots on ground, what he's doing right now, people are thinking that we're out there killing all these people. I heard a horrible message today in this interview, and I didn't have the details on it. They said that we shot and destroyed a school and killed more than 120 children. I said, where was this ever? I mean, I was just in shock. We didn't do it. I had to find out afterwards that we didn't do it. Why are we spreading this? Are you noticing how many armchair quarterbacks have shown up out of nowhere that have never been vocal the way they're being vocal right now? And they're speaking against this whole thing. But whether those children were killed in that school, that would be horrible. But who spent time worried about our 241, 244 soldiers that were killed in the Beirut? Nobody talks about our soldiers that were killed and the ship that was destroyed in Yemen. I mean, I can't list all the things that the Iranians have done because it's not been my focus, but I've lived it. And I knew it happened to all of these people. But no one has really stood up for that. So why are we standing up now and saying we cannot do this? And why are we saying it's a Middle Eastern war? And why are we calling it that we've never left doing wars? That is not what President Trump is doing. I wish I had made the list, but I knew by the end of the year he'd already snuffed out 8 wars. I know that he's already made peace in areas that have never had peace. The one I really know about that I was so thrilled about that I think our friend was part of, my cousins were in the Congo for 44 years. It was the Congo, and then they were taken in and held because he knew so many ways to help, and she knew so many ways to help that they held them during the coup as it became Zaire. Then they held them again when it went from Zaire back to Congo. And I kept wanting to get to Africa, and I never got to Africa while they were there. They were there 44 years, and when it went into a coup again, they were just done because they don't get along with people. And Trump's been able to accomplish that, but that's just one of the peace deals he's made beyond this whole peace board. So to say that he's doing all of that and nobody's really focusing on that, but now because our planes are in the air and we're accomplishing some things that nobody has dealt with for a long time, I think it would be helpful, and I don't know if the people understand this, we're not dealing with the country of Persia, we're dealing with the people who became the Iranian regime that's been controlled by a Revolutionary Guard Corps. And nobody's even mentioning that. I mean, when I mention it, they go, I don't even know what the hell that is. It's Khomeini, Sheila. It's just Khomeini. No, it's not. It's a whole network of these guys. So if we can explain this to the people, because I'm getting hit up with it all the time and nobody wants to believe me. So if I'm off, please feel free to tell me, but it's frustrating dealing with this every single day this week.
So the financial connections that we're talking about, you have Iran's newly named Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khomeini has been secretly building a property and financial empire worth over 100 million pounds across the United Kingdom, Europe, and the Gulf. And King Charles, as a lot of people are saying, when he was Prince Charles, converted to Islam. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff that's flying around out there. What's true, what's not, but I think we're starting to see that, the financial connections and are deep between England and Iran and all these other countries that are giving us some problems, which Trump is cleaning up. Now, let's move over into the election side. We know we have to clean up our election. You guys are so deep in all this stuff. I can only do like one question. It's like it takes an hour. It's crazy. It's beautiful. But so the election fraud, it's so deep. I think we're going to see Juan, you have really been focused on Tina Peters. I really think she's about to be released. We've had the governor of Colorado say he feels bad because there was a Democrat that was convicted of the same thing and she got off light, and so he feels really bad about that. So he's looking at letting Tina Peters off, and she was just, I guess they were trying to convict her for fighting in the jail, and the jail is like, no, she was just protecting herself, and so we're not going to press charges. So looks like she might be clear to get out. Now, she's definitely tied to the theft of the last election, 2020 election. Where do you guys see this election reveal going into 2024 26, we're coming up on an election again, the midterms. Where do you see that going? We're going to see an executive order to clean everything up. They're going to pass that one bill to make sure everybody votes with ID. What's going to happen? Juan?
Well, President Trump has said he's going to sign the executive order, and he said in a few days, that was several months ago, that the attorneys were going through it, and then you've had the articles which I sent you, some of them in the mainstream media, about the fact that advisors behind the scenes are acknowledging that the president has a 17-page executive order that he is preparing to sign. Well, that's the executive order that my team, the coalition, put together, that allowed them to put together back at the inauguration day. And so we're close on that, but timing is everything. And one of the things that is going on that literally is just not talked about, I've mentioned it, you've probably mentioned it, but it's not gotten much traction. You have now 3 different grand juries that are hearing information concerning election fraud, and that those 3 different grand juries have done some pretty wild stuff. I told you out there, it's not really for the public, but something specific happened with one of the grand juries that was just completely never happened before. And in the way that they were processing evidence and information, and what they, when it's public, it will be at some point in time. You can say, well, yeah, he told me, but not for now. And ultimately, what I believe is going to happen, I've said it publicly, I think one of the very first major arrests is John Brennan. And that the only real question is, will it be confined initially to just things that would go through the normal Justice Department arrest and prosecution systems? Will it stay there? Or will his be the first one where he goes direct to Gitmo for treason and traitoristic activities? Because that's absolutely what's there. He assisted and was instrumental in the election frauds in 2020 and 2024, the attempted fraud there in 2024. And former director of CIA. When the former director of the CIA is arrested, if he goes through the normal, having his charges read against him and gets out on some kind of bail or something like that, that's one thing. If he's arrested and he isn't given bail because of the treasonous side and goes straight to Gitmo, that will be, one of those earth-shattering things either way, one more so than the other. Think of what Trump, when they went ahead and killed Khomeini, the Israelis are the ones that did that, going after the leadership. But a few days later, when they're having their meeting there in Guam to pick the next leader, and then all of those leadership were taken out, that's a head and shoulders shot. They took out the leader. They anticipated the meeting where they would pick the one to take control after that, and took those guys out. So the group that's picked Khomeini's son was a much more fractionalized, smaller group. And by the way, think about the kid. Do you want to be the one that they name as the next leader based on what happened to the last one, your dad, and what was aimed at the rest of that group? Is that a death sentence? Doesn't sound like a great honor to me, but the reason that needs to be raised, in the same way that you anticipate how your enemy's going to respond and then next moves, if you're anticipating how the people that want to keep saying that Trump is wrong, there was no election fraud, the elections were the cleanest in the history of the world, coming into out of 2020 and the 2024. If you're going to say that they're all clean and there's no problem, then if you have John Brennan arrested, where grand juries have handed down indictments, it becomes very hard to have those conversations. And there's going to be all sorts of turmoil, all sorts of angst and wringing of hands and everything. So with that in mind, do you think that Trump and team have anticipated the reverberations? Then go back a little bit. How does, let's say they let Tina loose and Trump's, pushing hard to make that happen. How do you take that off the front pages and come up with something else that makes that a relatively moot issue? They think they're going to have all sorts of traction going after President Trump because he would push hard on the governor of Colorado to have Tina released. How do you take that off the front pages? Well, be something like a Brennan arrest. And how do you take that off the front pages? Well, you don't. Why? Because you don't want it off the front pages. They'll want an invasion somewhere. They'll want North Korea to show up with their latest version of a bomb somewhere. Why is Trump doing what he's doing in Iran first and Venezuela before that and some of the other actions? Because this is a globalist attack by nation states across the world on the U.S. election. What Trump has done, moving towards the mother of all conflicts over election fraud and financial fraud, is he's taking away the ability to distract America and the world with some kind of Iran-led attack and terrorism, some type of Venezuelan-led attack and terrorism. And by the way, you remember this one little detail. Spain was one of the countries who refused to allow us to use our bases in Spain, where we have agreements, to help with what we're doing in Iran. So we cut the checkbook off. No money going to Spain. We're not encouraging any business in Spain. If you're a tourist, think twice about going to Spain, riding any of the ships out of the ports, etc. Spain was front and center. Where does Spain lead to? Mexico. The super hyper wealthy folks that are out of Spain are the families that are running Mexico by remote control. And into California. Remember, I just told your audience moments ago, the guy who admitted that here he is superintendent of the school district, largest school district in the country. And where's the hail from? To. There's strong indications he's got some questions he's going to have to answer concerning his affiliation, his contacts into Spanish intelligence. With the school district superintendent, because it's the money, it's the flow of students, people within this whole immigration scheme through Mexico and from many other parts of the world. So there's little sneakers in here, Easter eggs, that we're going to get surprises we just never saw coming in the way this plays out. Trump's doing peripheral things so that we can concentrate on what's going on in the country, especially in his first and foremost, most important thing that he must address in order to have some sense of voting during his entire time of life, to get the election system where it's on, that the American people actually get to vote for and get their people into office through elections, and then the money. And everything you're seeing peripherally is working its way back to doing that. And England, by the way, they anticipated a lot of this. I took people all the way back to 2015 before Trump announced who was coming in.
We lost Juan. There's a wonderful quote from Schumer. I was just looking it up to make sure I could say it right, because they're trying to do the Save America Act. And as a senator, here's Schumer's quote, and I'll just give it to you, and then we can take it from there. It switched pages on me as soon as I went to click on it, wouldn't you know? So Schumer is not wanting the Save America Act, and this is why. He said it will allow ICE to kick tens of millions of people off the voter rolls. That is one of the best quotes we could get from Schumer for something like this. And I don't think he realized what he was saying, because he and Anthony Weiner, we've talked about this, are the two that are named who are still living. Those big secret societies don't name them until the memorial pages. So you don't know until FDR is dead that he's a high noble, or all the Supreme Court justices were high nobles, and all of the, you don't get to know. And so here he is saying, but he didn't say tens of thousands, he said tens of millions. And that's what it has been. Every year it was multiple millions. By 2000, it was over 10 million a year. And then it was 12 million a year. It just kept increasing. And it was doubling until it got to the fact that it was 9.9 million, and then it was 12 million. But before it was a 4.5, then 9.9. It just kept moving in the tens of millions. And so for Schumer to say that and not even comprehend, I don't think what he said, because the other part of this is all these audits. And we already know the numbers. So did you see the headline in the last 24, 48 hours in Arizona? They had a secret subpoena that showed up. There was a secret subpoena and it was served on them. And now they have the documents. Subpoenas aren't secret. Subpoenas are served on you, and you don't have an option but to respond to the subpoena. But what happened in Georgia, I'll give you a comparison. What happened in Georgia, just in Fulton County, I'll just take that as an example. Fulton County sent him back to readjust their subpoena 3 times. And so when they came back the final time, there was a gal on TikTok, and she was in the hallway, and she was whispering, because she said, even Tulsi Gabbard is here. And we're working on this. We've got attorneys working on this. We're probably going to file an injunction before the end of the day, blah, blah, blah. And they'd already rewritten it many times. What they don't understand is, I don't think anyone's heard the back end of Fulton County. They not only found 315,000 ballots that were false ballots, were not the correct ballots, but they were all for Biden. And he only won in that county by 11,000. Okay, so they found 315,000. But here's the joke. They didn't know we already knew the numbers. We were just making sure that they were matching up the numbers. They removed other ballots to put those 315,000 in. And we already know what the counts are on the other ballots. Do you see what I mean? They're operating cover up, cover up, cover up. So it's kind of fun. And that one that just happened in Arizona, I'm really hoping that the people demand audits of all of them. Let's get all these subpoenaed. Let's get all these county records, and let's get citizens volunteering to do the counts. And you can see this is a valid ballot, this is not. Let them see the actual evidence. This could be fun. It could be really fun, because we just had, I'm not in Texas, but Lieutenant Colonel Pete Chambers ran for governor in Texas. And wasn't there something, Juan, where the president already issued an order that you cannot use the machines in the next elections? And, or is that coming out in the new one? Because he's said it several times.
That would be with, yeah, he's saying we're not going to allow the machines to be used, but he hasn't issued the executive order yet. And in order to, people have to remember, just, I've said it before, but just to remind people in the audience, you're going to hear people say, well, he can't do that because it's the state's responsibility to run the elections. Except what he's got to do, what's in the very first lines of the executive order that was put together by my team. It has to be an executive order done in conjunction with an emergency declaration of a national emergency related to elections and the election process. And the context for a national emergency is that we have been attacked by enemies external. This isn't just a problem within the states or some U.S. citizens or processes, etc., and counties, etc. This was an attack. It was a nation-state level attack orchestrated from several locations outside the United States. So it was the use of an election weapon of mass destruction against America, and therefore, in the context of a national emergency in the field of elections, the president has to act not as president, but as commander in chief. And the response is a military response because we were attacked. This isn't a policing matter. This is a military matter because we were attacked using military type weapons within the classification of a weapon of mass destruction. Once you kind of get your mind around that, you begin to understand that there's no court, there's no judge once President Trump declares a national emergency, and that it's an external attack that we're responding to. There's no court, there's no governor who can defy the president in that type of a matter, that commander-in-chief jurisdiction. So, for example, somebody like Polis, Governor Polis out of Colorado, saying, I'm not going to honor a presidential pardon of Tina Peters, cannot, in the context of that kind of a national emergency. The president is king. And by the way, those titles that you mentioned earlier, they have legal meanings attached to them. So when you add certain titles to President Trump within these other international agreements and systems, that have certain weight. They're not just formalities of, flowering something up. They have legal substance to them. And the last thing I wanted to mention, before you had public schools, the schools were run by church organizations. The universities were founded and run by various church groups, and you picked where you wanted to go. And you got religious training tied into it. You had a capturing, a hijacking of all of these institutions, both at the university level and at the public, community level, in bringing about this public school education system, which now has become the basis. Look, where are the majority of the vote precincts across the country located? In public school buildings. And so when you go to the public school to vote on a school bond, there's a certain intimidation level, even where you're at, you got to do this. This is, it's a hijacking of our society for all the right reasons, for the children. And everybody wants to, see good things happen for the kids and like that. You're about to see a repulsion, an angst, an anger that's going to be focused on those people running the public schools who, for the sake of the children, have brought America to the brink of some kind of destitution. All of the 401ks, all of these banks, and by the way, just last thing I'll say, although it's 600 banks primarily that are affected directly on these bonds, the reality is that's not an adequate number. The banks that are holding much of these bonds have to then go to other member banks, who then go to any of the big five, and they take their bonds and they borrow money against them by the Federal Reserve, printing money. And they don't print it just based on the face value. They print it on some extrapolation of the total end payment value. How much is the bond going to pay at full maturity? And so they've been issuing money based on that full maturity value, not on what the bank or minor bank paid, and getting more cash into the system, diluting the existing money in the system. And by the way, the amount of money printed and into the system during the Biden administration is like 2.5 times what was there when Trump left office, and that's a conservative number. We're now finding out new stuff where they were printing even more money we didn't know about. So this bond thing is going to be a hyper-sensitive area and tied to education and the hijacking of the way we raise our children, even into the spiritual realm. The way that our children were stolen away from us by these Pied Pipers of the bond market and the education market.
Yeah, the fraud is accelerating in a lot of different states. Wisconsin, like we saw, and then of California, and now in Texas. So it's gonna spill into other states, and that fraud is gonna really bring a lot of this stuff down. So where do you see, Sheila? Where do you see all of the fraud? What's that going to do for America? Because I think it's really widespread. Because Juan was talking about Illinois is going to blow everybody's mind. I think same thing in New York. What do you think is the fraud level that's happening in America, and how's it going to impact America?
Well, the financial is huge. It's bigger than people can possibly imagine. There's something I wanted to bring up about the elections because the election fraud has been so intense, and the whole thing about and this relates to Tina Peters and what Juan was just saying is that they're trying to say that the states are in charge of the elections. And when I was first researching for the Pike that was tight with Kissinger, that Pike said that his parents died, so he didn't know the names of his parents. And none of their bios have any parents or grandparents. There's no connection with any other Pike members or whatever. So this Pike in the 70s in America was real tight with Kissinger. And that guy, he was in his 14th term. And I thought, how the hell was he in a 14th term? 14 times 4. And why are we calling these midterm elections? They're midterm in between the presidential elections every 4 years. But the terms of these 14, he was 2-year terms. So when have we ever had elections, Juan, that were not related to federal, of some congressional reps in federal positions, and that the records had to go to the House of Representatives for a permanent record? When did that?
Well, and by the way, just so that everybody has it in their mind, the midterms, the way that these globalistas, these deep staters have this set up, whoever came into power in the presidential election was usually counterbalanced by what happened in the midterms, and vice versa, back and forth like a yo-yo. And we could never break free. You could never get one side or the other to get a clear win, because they don't want one side or the other to win clearly. They want this back and forth because they control everything between the two parties. And by the way, just remind everybody here, to remind all of you, at the end of the day, domestically, the group that's fighting Trump domestically, the hardest, that's SES, Senior Executive Service. In conjunction with the Inspector General's office, both offices created under Jimmy Carter, both offices, George Bush Sr. and his cohorts around him put together the skeleton of those organizations based on what happened when we got the Church Committee hearings and exposed what was going on over the CIA. And remember, George W. Bush, a businessman who had been to China as the Chinese business liaison for America back during the Nixon administration, because we didn't have an ambassador to China, so we did a business relations for them. And that was, by the way, tied to his work, tied to Kissinger with, or tied to Bush 1 with Rockefeller. Both Kissinger and then Nixon, at a later point when he lost the Kennedy election or had it stolen from him, worked for Rockefeller there in the same building for a period of time as an attorney. And so you've had this hidden hand involved all the way along. Well, who was doing the manipulation of these people in the U.S. system? A lot of that was tied to the Brits. Everywhere you look, the Brits were running America from behind the scenes. Where did the dossier come from against Trump? Came from the City of London. Where did Stroke and Page from the FBI go to get the dossier saying that Trump did all this stuff, and the Russia stuff went to the City of London, the city within the city? And just a reminder, the Queen Mother, when she was alive, would have to go every year to the gate as a formality of the City of London, the city within the city, the old Roman city. They would open the gates, and then she would take her shoes off because she's entering onto holy ground. She would take her shoes off, enter the gate, present herself to the mayor of the city of London, curtsy and bow, do homage, and acknowledge him as the true ruler of what was going on. I mean, where does the queen bow to anybody, right? She bows to somebody that has greater authority and power than she does. That was the banks there in the city of London, the old Roman city. And again, where did the dossier come from against Trump? We're fighting a very entrenched crowd that is working from that city within the city. It's the Davos crowd. It's the Club of Rome, Atlantic Council, Council on Foreign Relations, things like that. There is a secret hidden hand in so much of what's going on in the world, and it ties into the financial. The problem for everybody involved now, they thought they were going to be able to hide a lot of this in a collapse of the U.S. economic system. Had Hillary won, they'd have already succeeded. Bitcoin would be worth $3 to $5 million a coin right now. Because you can't do it with paper, but you can do it with digital dots and tittles on a computer screen. You can't afford enough paper to buy your way out of this, so you're going to have the digital. Everybody here should bear in mind that to protect yourself as we go through this, because you're not going to stop what's about to happen. It's impossible. And the angst as we go after the election frauds is going to have a spillover on the financial side. So with that in mind, getting out of the way is have tangible things that have real value as you go into this, so that as we go through this currency war, Federal Reserve and stuff related to that and Treasury, you have stuff that is real and is tangible to work with, to revalue your wealth with when these other things go essentially to zero.
Well, Charles I was, beheaded, and I think the city of London had a piece of that. So that's probably why they come in there and bow and curtsy and everything. So
yeah. Yeah, and by the way, the Windsors are actually German. They're out of the Black Forest area, and their original name of the royal family was Saxe-Coburg Gotha, and so they hijacked the British crown, and you can talk to plenty of Brits about that. So even they aren't actually who you think they are.
Good point. Sheila.
I was just wanting to clear up about the 2-year terms, because it used to be before Woodrow Wilson that all reps were elected, and then out of those group of reps, two of the 2-year terms would be your 2 senators, and they would be chosen. And if they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing for the state, the reps could pull them back. Am I right on this? And that
yes, and
all
that's
the
very
elections.
Important. Hold on, slow down for a second. There's plenty of very powerful people, including Supreme Court justices, who have said that if you don't go back to having the state legislatures pick their Senate people as opposed to just the general vote, so that it's a senator is a representative from the state of the legislature, not elected in the normal vote system, you'll never get America back under control. And so this whole issue of how senators are chosen, constitutionally, the way they were chosen was decided for a reason, and they were literally just a representative of the state legislature on behalf of the citizens. They weren't elected in a citizen side of the election, with it in mind that they could be pulled back. Remember, they're the ones that handle spending, that approve spending, and so it's tied right to the states. What's how much spending we're going to allow, and you're hijacking those senators are there for 6 years. If you had them by the legislature, they could be pulled back by the legislature if they went awry foul of what the state legislature wanted and the obligations they were getting on taxation and spending and where the money was coming back to the state that they were sending to the feds. There's no leash on the U.S. senators at this point in time, and that is not the way the Constitution had it set up with great thought in the way they were set up.
So we are supposed to be on 2-year terms for everybody. The 6 years was set up by Woodrow Wilson, and then every election then is a federal election. When you were mentioning about they want to control the elections from the state level, there are no separate state elections. And that's what I was trying to get to, is that there are no state elections, and our records are supposed to go to the House of Representatives, and when did they ever send them there? And now they don't want to even release them under subpoena. They are completely running rogue on all of this. So when we were talking about election fraud, I just wanted to come back to that because I didn't think we had clarity for the people on that.
Well, and by the way, just before you dive in here,
real quick,
Michael.
Speaking of the election fraud and all those senators that voted for Biden, there's been a lot of talk that that's treason. What do you think about that? And then maybe take it after what you were going to talk about, Juan.
Well,
there's 93 that they found in 93 of the senators that have to be tried for treason just for that, by proceeding with the election and not questioning it and not doing a review of it when we had all the details. In fact, Colonel Waldron, when he was in Pennsylvania at the hearings, and Rudy Giuliani was there and Jenna Ellis was there, this is back in the beginning, they already had the details. And when they said, Doug Mastriani, I think is how you pronounce his name, he was running for governor, and he kept asking, because he was in the state legislature there, and he kept saying, so where are you getting these numbers? How do you know that this is what happened? And Colonel Waldron was saying, well, my white hats have all the information. So none of this is new that we're facing now that we didn't know back then. And so having all of this information to say now we're going to start be dealing with fraud is that they were given 3 more opportunities. They were given 22, they were given 24, never cleaned it up. Now here they are in 26 and they're still refusing to clean it up, refusing to stop using the machines, refusing to use paper ballots, refusing to do same-day voting. And they're still not following the Constitution. So when you're purposely, knowingly doing this with all of these times you've been told, because people said, well, Sheila, it didn't matter in 24. I said, yes, it did. And they said, well, we never heard anything about what happened in 24. And I said, this time, when they came with the white box trucks and they came with the blank ballots at midnight to the warehouse to knock them off at the same warehouse, there were our military inside, our National Guard members, military, we're all inside. People have no idea that any of these people have been arrested. Everybody's thinking we're not doing anything. We're not getting anywhere. So I don't think people understand we do everything by the rule of law. And that's where the president held up the Bible when they had the riots and he went behind and to the church that had burned. And he held up the Bible and he said, this is our rule of law. And then all the guys went marching with him and they were so proud and did the photo ops and everything. And then the next day they go, what are you doing? Matching that up. And even Bill Barr said, well, if I would have known he was going to say stuff like that, I wouldn't have gone with him. Well, then what are you going to base things on? You're our attorney general. You know what I mean? So the people haven't known that we gave them a chance. We gave them a second chance. We're giving them a third chance. They're still knowingly not doing what they need to do. And that's why I was bringing up some of the things that are in the Constitution, because like you were saying, Juan, we've got a chance now. If we don't come back to the Constitution, then what is it there for?
Well, and this is to follow on where you're at there. If you have a national emergency declared, I had some work done on one of my vehicles the other day, and they had a bunch of the settings. There's like 30 different settings that you can do to change lots of little things. Well, shoot, they had a lot of them all over the place. And so there was one spot in all of the program, return to factory settings. If Trump declares a national emergency and takes over militarily for a period of time. He can also, just like Woodrow Wilson brought in the 6-year terms on the senators and the elections, we can go back to factory settings. And there was a lot of thought that went into this on how elections are conducted and held. And we're coming up on, here's why this doesn't work. Here's where it is a problem. At some point, return to factory settings, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Brilliant. I love it. Yeah, and return to the factory settings, it brings back the republic. Taken away in 1871, and this unconstitutional corporation that started to infiltrate and infiltrated to every state down to all the way to the county level. We have to turn all of that back around. I think it's doable. But we have to have like you're talking about, Juan. I love it. A reset. So.
Well, and think about this: Federal Reserve came in, and then also the IRS. What were we servicing? We were servicing this bankruptcy debt, supposedly to England, going all the way back to 1812 and before. And at some point, you call the debt paid. We're not paying interest on the interest on the interest. Done. Over. Out. And as I said back in 2014, if Trump decided to run, he would be here to preside over the bankruptcy of America. And that's when my phone cut out a few minutes ago. I apologize. We had a call coming in. But I said that Trump would be here to manage the bankruptcy. Now, it's not a bankruptcy, sell all the goods, and the country's over with. It's a where we decide what the true debts are and how we're going to service those, and what, for example, in these bankruptcies, a lot of times the attorneys are charging monstrous fees. They're typing everything that isn't nailed down, and the real people that had the original skin in the game, they get next to nothing. If you have a good judge, then he looks for the people that actually had real ownership, skin in the game when these financial transactions began, and tries to make them whole. Even though you might not be able to get what they wanted for expectations and hope, they do get as much as possible of whatever's left of the core of their investment back before you start getting these rapacious attorneys' fees and things like that. So Trump is presiding over, at a very technical level, exactly as I said, the bankruptcy of America. It's not to divide it up and send it all over and the end of America. It's to get to the true owners of America and cut off these rapacious payment plans that will never get solved, never get finished, including Federal Reserve. What's the Constitution if you do the reset? The currency of America is gold and silver minted by U.S. Treasury. And so that's good for all bills, public and private. So it's not paper fiat. It's not run out of the city of London. And you go back to gold and silver, a lot of these things get solved. And then no more IRS, by the way. And Trump has said that numerous times. We have an external tax, not an internal tax. People who want to do business here pay a fee so that we keep wages and commerce going in America. It was an attack on America to force us to export industry to everywhere in the world and to shut down America. America's open for business under Trump. We're going to return business to America. So you have children, you have a heritage, they have a job, and there's something they can do right here at home, and they're not competing with foreign workers that are working at slave labor rates in China.
When you mentioned about the corruption, I just looked up the Jefferson quote, and I was trying to share it, but it has to go to the whole screen, and it doesn't want to pull up. So I'm going to say it. We've shared it before. Jefferson's made this one quote: "When once a republic is corrupted, there is no possibility of remedying any of the growing evils, but by removing the corruption and restoring its lost principles, every other correction is either useless or a new evil."
Yep, hit the reset switch. Factory settings.
Yep.
All right, guys. Let's call it here. It's almost 2 hours. So great show. Great insights from both of you. God, if you didn't enjoy this show, you're dead. So Juan, the Jennifer Mack
Yeah,
.com.
yeah, she's got some really cool stuff over there. She's got a latest version of her parasite protocols there with things that with a lot of the people that have used them and that we've done that she's updated on. So that's over there. It's like $12. It's so and that includes all the shipping, handling, and all that. And then the other thing is she's got what President Trump, besides honest elections and honest money, it has to be done in the context of a without God's presence, without God's blessing. All of this is futile. It's moot. It'll never happen. So President Trump, in the context of getting honest elections, honest money, has called for a national day of prayer and rededication on May 17th in the National Mall to call upon God, essentially, like people renew their marriage vows. Why are we here? Who do we honor as our God? And looking for our Father in heaven, not the Father, the devil himself. The Pharisees and Sadducees, Christ said, ye are of your father, the devil. Okay, so when you say our Father in heaven, you're making sure to make it. We mean the Father in heaven, not the other one. Okay, we're going to rededicate America to divine ordinances, principles, ways of operation and interaction that have a future, and realign America with right thinking, right principles. And it's not just that day of May 17th, which Jen has what we call a May 17th Packer 517. And by the way, as Thessalonians 517, prayer with pray without ceasing. Okay, and what's the period of time till the 4th of July, the 250th anniversary of the Constitution being signed, enacted. The July 4th, if you include the beginning day of the 17th and July 4th, that's 49 days, 7 times 7. Trump's number is 7, by the way. He was, his first full day in office was January 21 of 2017. And he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old on his first full day in office. When he's inaugurated noon's a half day partying and sell, all the, so you don't really get to work. He shows up in his office at 7 in the morning, ready to go to work. That's kind of been a theme with them. And then the day after the 4th of July, that's that 50th day. That has meaning within Jubilee in the scriptures. All the land that might have been sold and transacted by your friends, relatives, parents, whatever, return to the original families. It's a period of restoration and renewal. And so the day after the 4th of July, we begin that Jubilee period here in America. And by the way, if you look at even the 250th year, 5 is the number of grace. It's the number of death and destruction to our enemies. That's why the Pentagon has 5 sides. They encode things with these various numbers because it has meaning for both sides. But 5 times 50, this is our 5th Jubilee year as a nation since the Constitution was signed. And there's something of meaning there. Even God, 40 days, 40 nights, 40 years wandering the desert. Numbers do have some significance in there. I don't run my life by it, but I think we do have to be aware of it. There's some rollover within what happens in nations and is happening in our nation where there's a reset that is necessary. The Jubilee was the reset period. And people should read about that and understand it. But the other thing I was going to mention, over at allpatriots at gumroad.com, which is my other site, because the silver came down, we have a special deal while silver's down below 100, and it's going to go way up. It's an excellent deal with some coins that I held back from previous years, and there's a great couple of deals there that you can go look at on the coins there with a sixth coin and an 11th coin in those 5 and 10 packs. So anyway, just for those that can do it, and the rest of you, one really critical thing. There's a lot of people in these audiences buying metals or something like that is the furthest thing from reality for them. Don't get strained on this. The people that do purchase metal and have it available, they're still going to need things. They're still going to need work done. They're still going to need assistance. They're still going to have, you'll have skills or things that you have available that they're still going to need. You'll be getting paid with their silver or gold for things that you have and want to convey, including your labor. And so that they have it just means you have a great opportunity to get paid in something with real value, not this paper currency with stolen taxes and fraud all attached to it. It will be a very healthy thing. And so that others may be in a position to do that is your security also for us as a people, as a nation. We're all in this together. Where we go one, we go all. And these things are going to happen that are going to capture the attention of the world. Believe me, when the first major person like a Brennan is seen in the orange jumpsuit walking through the gates of Gitmo, it will be real for everybody, and it's coming. Guaranteed, no question about it. Take a deep breath. It will be epic. The whole world is going to be shocked, stunned, and people are going to wake up very quickly to what's going on. And in the conjunction of honest vote, honest money, the bond stuff is a risk. Operate accordingly.
Yeah. And good point about the silver, because I heard an interview not long ago by a gentleman that was, he talked about his parents during the Weimar, period of time where, you bring your wheelbarrow to the front of a store and you couldn't get hardly anything. But if you had silver, there was a back door and you got everything. So, yeah, it's going to.
And let me just add this one little detail. I apologize for going so long, folks, but this is the interesting thing. There's two parts of the story. I had a friend years and years ago, and this was back in the late 70s. He lived through that period. He was elderly at the time. He and his brother were sent by mom with a wheelbarrow, a basket, a big laundry basket full of money. And she'd gotten the money because she was housing German soldiers in her house and feeding them, and then she would get money because she was a widow from First World War. She would get money for caring for them. So the two brothers went to town with this basket of money, and they were looking for anything as the money was collapsing. They set their basket with money down and one went to one side of the street and looked in the window where they had meat to see if they had any, and the other one went to the window of the bakery where they had bread. When they turned around, they looked, and somebody had dumped out their laundry basket and stolen the laundry basket. All the money was laying in the street. The laundry basket was worth more than the paper money that was in it. The second part of that story is, how did they survive after that? As World War II wore on, and in the waning days of World War II, they had this place that they had was a small farm. They had potatoes. They had a few vegetables that she would grow, and they would hide it out in their cellar. When the war ended, and for the next several years after the war, as you know, because it was the whole country was just completely wiped out, she would sell some of those, that little bit of crop that they had. In the 60s, his mom passed away. He spent the next decade living off of all of the rings, jewelry, gold pendants, everything. He said it must have been 20 pounds of gold jewelry, a little bit of silver, mostly gold in what he had, because that was the nature of the area, of things that she had that were very valuable, antiques, classics. Everybody got rid of that stuff because they just had to have food. And so here she is, this pauper, to all the world, who'd been trading, a few potatoes for a gold ring. Okay, so again, when these things happen, I don't expect it to get that way here for America, because what the plan is within the administration, there's a number of things. I don't want to go into too deep now. I'll spare it. We'll talk about it another time. But there is a plan to